All right, I think we are going to get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I think since we're a small group, I would love to just go do a quick go around and just remind me of your name. And if you weren't here last week, if you've used any Excel formulas before. You can start up here.
Hi, my name is Ruby. I wasn't here last week, but I watched the recording and still I'm not familiar with Excel formulas.
That is fair. All right. Yeah.
Where can I find it?
Apparently they're on the annenbergdl.org website. I've never been to that website, so I do not know, but apparently they are there. Yeah, like that. Okay, cool.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Luis. I've attended all the workshops so far.
Solid. Yep. So you got all our formulas from last week. Very good. And over here? Cool. That's all good. You can do a lot with simple formulas, so you're all good. Yeah, this says advanced formulas. Really, it's like another category of formulas from what we did last week. So if you missed last week or you haven't done formulas before, don't worry. This is just sort of a more a different category of formulas. So I am confident you'll be able to keep up. Cool. Okay. So what we're going to do today is focus on a couple of formula concepts. One of them you might have heard of VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. This is a really common sort of like intermediate Excel skill. This is something that a lot of employers like to see on your resume, just to see that, your Excel knowledge goes a little bit deeper than the surface and that you know how to kind of get in there and do some slightly more advanced functionality. So that's going to be the focus of our session today. We're also going to talk about how to write nested formulas, so how to look at a situation and understand how to nest formulas together. And also how to use formulas for cumulative functions. So when you want to see something like, how your revenue is looking after each order, or how something is looking cumulatively over time, that sort of thing, we'll be covering that as well. So to do that, we're going to start with a quick review of some formula basics, maybe just a little bit of a refresher for folks, and then we'll get into those 4 areas. The session will be the same as the past couple sessions in that it'll be pretty hands-on. So I'll talk about a concept and then I'll give you all a data set that you'll get onto your computer and do some practice runs of actually running through it. So hopefully that's helpful. We're not a huge group today, so if you have questions, just raise your hand, stop me, and we can talk about stuff as we go through. All right. Okay, so let's talk about some formula basics. So a formula, if you've ever looked at some code or looked at any coding languages, anything like that, functions are very similar. If you haven't done any coding, don't worry. They're probably like the most straightforward concept from that. But formulas usually look something like this. In Excel, if you do insert from your top bar and go to function, you'll get this great pop-up on the side that'll walk you through all the different formulas that exist and will tell you how to use them. So that's a tool I highly recommend if you're new to formulas to use this guy. It's kind of like a built-in help text that'll help you figure out what you need. But the main piece of information you're going to get about your formula, in addition to a definition, so in this case, we're looking at a very simple formula called len, short for length. So it's just going to tell us the number of characters in a text string. Pretty straightforward. And then you need to know the syntax of your formula. So that's this piece. That's the piece that goes in between your parentheses or your arguments. And so that's what goes into your function. So whenever you're doing a function in Excel, first thing you're going to type in the cell that you're in is the equal sign. That's how Excel knows that it's going to be a formula and not just a number or a date or some letters or numbers or words that you're writing. You're going to do an equal sign, then you're going to do the name of your function. The convention is to write these in all caps, but it will work if you do not. So that's totally up to you, but you'll typically see them written in all caps. And then in parentheses, you're going to type in whatever argument needs to go in your function, and this will tell you what that is. So in this case, it's saying you need to put some text in here whose length you want to find, and it'll count the spaces as characters as well as each of the letters. So this is important because if you do this formula and you put in a number, it's not going to work, right? It's telling you what type of information needs to go in there. Also, what's important about this is it'll tell you how many things need to go in there. So this is a simple formula where you're putting one piece of information into the parentheses, and it's going to spit out a result based on that. Some of our formulas that we're going to look at today are going to require multiple pieces of information. So you'll have some commas in your parentheses here. It might be like text, and then it needs a number, and then it needs something else. And it'll explain to you in your formula builder what each piece of information is. General concept makes sense so far? All right, cool. If you haven't done formulas in Excel before, I recommend you open up a blank sheet or a blank Google sheet and just try this one just to kind of get a sense of how it works. So you type your equal sign into any cell, type LEN, open parentheses, and then text in Excel. You're usually going to need your double quotes around so that it recognizes it as text. So you can do double quotes, type in your name, and it'll tell you how many characters long your name is. I can do that along with you. Right here, for example. So I'm going to hop into a cell and I'm going to do, you can see right here, but also in your formula editor bar up at the top. Let me zoom this in a little bit. Get out of here, zoom in. Okay, so I'm going to do my equal sign, LEN. I'll do my name, Rachel Raley. Close my quotes, close my parentheses, hit enter on my keyboard, and it'll tell me that my name is 13 characters long. This box will say 13, but if you hover back over it and look back in your formula bar at the top, that's where you'll see the formula that you typed in, your LEN, and then whatever your name is in the double quotes. So especially if you're new to formulas, go ahead and give that a try just so you can see how that works. People good on that so far? Okay, cool. Hopefully you know how many letters long your name is so you can check that it's correct. My name is 12 letters plus the space, so that checks out. Cool. All right. Okay, so throughout this sort of workshop series, I have been trying to kind of base our exercises and what we're learning in some kind of real life examples or cases where you might actually use Excel at an internship or job that you might have in the future. So this is the type of problem that we're going to be talking about solving today, and this is what we'll use some of the tools that we're going to learn today to solve. So let's say you are doing marketing for maybe a network of podcasts. It's a really large network. You guys have 500 different podcasts that you work with. And you've got a list of the audio files that they've prepared for their episodes for next week. And you want to know if all the shows that you manage have uploaded their episodes. So you've got episodes over here, you've got shows over here, and you're trying to figure out sort of a matching problem. These things come up all the time in work settings, especially a lot of like communication media type of settings. We've got advertising use cases, this super common sort of situation. So that's the type of problem we're going to be talking about. We also want to see a list of all those episodes with their title and the audio file. So a lot of times when you get a spreadsheet, things might not have all the same columns in the same sheet. You might have a column over here that's your shows, and a column over here that's your a sheet over here that's your shows, and a sheet over here that's your episodes. And there might be cases where you want to be able to combine that information so you can see it all in one view, send it to someone who has fewer Excel skills than you do, that kind of thing. So this is the type of problem that we're going to be talking about today and learning some skills to solve. All right. So with that sort of matching problem in mind, what is VLOOKUP? What does that have to do with our matching problem? So what VLOOKUP is going to do is it's going to take a value that you want to search for, and it's going to go search for that value in another range. And a range is basically just a bunch of cells in Excel, so a bunch of those little rectangles. So VLOOKUP is essentially just sort of an automation of the otherwise manual process of you saying, all right, for show number 1, if I go look at my list of episodes, did show number 1 upload an episode? Yep, I found it. Here's the episode. Okay, show number 2. That is the sort of the manual version of how you might do this. VLOOKUP is the formula version that's going to do that for you in bulk. the sort of value it will return, it can be any value to the right of the value that you're searching. I'll explain more what that means in a second. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about our syntax. So if you're if you have an open Excel window, which I recommend for the duration of this workshop, if you go to your insert menu at the top and go to function, you can search for or find VLOOKUP in your little function browser, and you'll see this same screen. This is explaining what our arguments to our VLOOKUP function are. So in this case, VLOOKUP takes 4 arguments. We can tell that because there's 4 things here, and there's 4 things with commas in between in our parentheses, okay? So the 4 pieces of information that go into VLOOKUP that are gonna sort of return a value based on the value that we're searching for. First is our lookup value. So what are we searching for? If we're looking for the episode for show number 1, our lookup value might be our show ID number, and our ID number is 1 in this case. So that's the value that we're gonna go look up in our other table. Table array, this is where is that table that you're gonna go look up in? What is that range of cells? Is it in another sheet? Is it just over a few columns? What is that range of cells? Your index number, so this is gonna say, all right, let's give it a range of cells that might be several columns wide, is the information that you wanna grab in the first column, the second column, the third column. So you're gonna tell it a number, and that's how many columns over the piece of information that you want is. That part will make more sense in a second once we look at it. Okay, and then there's a slightly funky argument at the end. This is a sort of range lookup is what it's called. This is essentially asking if you want to do like a fuzzy match or an exact match. So fuzzy match would be like if it wasn't spelled exactly the same or something like that, and you still wanted to return a result. In my experience in real life, this should almost always be false. False means you want an exact match of the text. That's because it's hard to tell when you do a fuzzy match, like exactly how fuzzy it's being. And in my experience, it tends to match things that really don't make sense. So it's better to set this as false, at least the first time you run it through, see how many perhaps missing or unmatched pieces of data you have, and then decide how you want to handle it from there. Okay. I know this can be a lot to absorb if you haven't necessarily seen VLOOKUP before. So let's get a little more concrete with an example. But the main thing we're to take away from this is we've got 4 pieces of information that we need to be able to gather to use this function, okay? All right, so here's a very simple example of something we would use VLOOKUP for. This is we're running a little coffee shop. We've got 2 sort of tables of information. We've got sort of a history of our orders. So what was the order number and what was the item on that order? And then over here is like our menu with our prices, right? So each beverage and each price. I don't know where you can get $2 coffee, but this is a fictional example. Okay. So what we want to do is take our order table and add the price as a column next to each item. So I could do this manually, right? I could look and say this one's cappuccino. Cappuccino is $6.50. Type in $6.50 in another column. This is cappuccino. Type in $6.50 again. This one's a matcha latte. Type in $6. Right? You can see how you would do that manually. That'd be a pain, and that's not using the power of Excel. So that's what we're going to do, but with this formula. So to use VLOOKUP here to do this task, to add a prices column, what we're going to do is add another column next to our data. I'm going to call this item price, and that's where I'm going to use my VLOOKUP formula. So I'm going to start with my equals sign because it's a formula. I'm going to type in VLOOKUP because that's the name of my function. Yeah, it doesn't have to be all caps, but it usually is. And then this is where I'm going to refer to my data that this is going to take in. So these are those 4 arguments that we were talking about before. So the thing that I want to look up, my lookup value, is in this cell. So once you're typing in here, you can use your arrow keys to like go around to your different cells. So I would probably just use my arrow key over here to say, I want to look up cappuccino in this table, right? That's the value I'm going to go search for and see if it's in my beverage list so I can grab the price. Okay, that's my first argument. So then I'm going to put a comma after that. Next argument is the range of my cells. So this is where I want to select my whole, these 4 cells this way, 2 cells this way, this like 8-cell box. I want to select all of that as my range for my second argument because that's my table array. That's the table I'm going to go look for this value in. Now, this value should always be in the leftmost column of this table, okay? I'll put in the dollar signs in a second. So don't worry about the dollar signs. It's just otherwise the selection of those cells. Okay, so we got our comma. Our third argument. Does anyone remember what our third argument was for VLOOKUP? Index number, great. So index number is going to tell us which number column we want to grab from here. So in this case, I want the price, which in this little table is the second column. So I'm going to take my number 2. You could imagine if I had a bunch more info over here, like, is this a vegan? You know, like yes, no, like whatever other columns, I could do column like 7 here instead if there's some other piece of information that I want to grab. In this case, it's simple. I only have the one column. I just want to grab the price. So I'm going to tell it to grab the thing in column 2 that corresponds to the thing that I looked up in my first cell. And then this last argument, if you like aren't sure, I would always set this to false. And in general, I would recommend setting it to false as a best practice. So that's my last argument. I'm going to close my parentheses, hit enter, and that's what's going to populate my item price all the way down this column next to my orders. Okay. Concept, does that make sense so far? Yeah, great. So the second argument is just telling me where in my sheet do I go look? Like, where's my other table? So maybe that one would make more sense to see in this guy. Here we go. Delete this other stuff out of here because we'll come back to this. So what I'm going to do here, delete this out of here, is do my VLOOKUP. So I'm going to go grab my cappuccino. That's the value I'm going to look up. I'm going to do my comma. I'm going to go over here and select all these cells. That's telling it that this is my other data source for the lookup. These can be in a different like tab, a different sheet of your thing. They can be wherever, but you just got to go select whatever range of cells you want it to go look up in. Does that make sense? Cool. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So here, and then, so this is where we're going for our index number. So we're going to see which column of information we want out of the price. That's in the second column. So I'm going to do my 2, hit one more comma, and then I'm just going to type in the word false so that it only matches on the exact spelling, exact capitalization, all that type of stuff. Hit enter. And you see it's got my 6.5, which is my 650 right here for my cappuccino. I can drag this down from the corner and it'll copy my function all the way down. Now, this gets to, so you'll notice it gets the price right for the first few, and then it starts having this like weird error looking thing, right? So this is where we get into our absolute cell reference. We talked about this a little bit last week, so this might be a bit of a review for you, but an important concept for everyone else. So when I look at my formula that I typed in, right, I have M13, which is this guy, and then I have my range of cells, which goes from row 12 to row 15 in columns I and J, right? That's what that is saying. Now, I'm going to scroll down once, and I copy pasted this same formula, right, all the way down. So if I move my cursor down one, and then we look in our formula bar at what's in this one, we see something kind of interesting. So my first argument is M14. So M14 is cappuccino. That makes sense. That's the thing I want to go look up in the table. But when we look at where it's looking in the table, it's looking from rows 13 to 16. So it's moved down one row for this, but it's also moved this down a box. And that's not helpful to me because I didn't want it to move this down a box. This should stay and this one should move down, right? So that's the difference. So in the case where you want a certain set of cells to stay as the same reference, even as you're moving down your rows and your other, like in this column, you can add your dollar signs, which lock it in place. So if I add a dollar sign before each of the letters and numbers here, so I'm typing $4 signs up in my top thing. So I'm locking in, I'm saying rows 12 to 15. I want every single row, thousands of rows down, to only reference like these 4 rows right here for this data source. Those dollar signs are what's going to lock it in place for me. So if I do that, I'm going to hit enter. And my first answer is still the same, right? Makes sense. Second answer, still the same. Third answer, still the same. But as I drag this the rest of the way down, you'll see my errors go away for the most part. Right? It's now able to correctly grab my drip coffee because it can find it in a sort of locked reference. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Okay. So We do still have one error though after we fix our cell reference. We have ones that's showing up as NA. That's how errors for VLOOKUP show up. What is the problem with that row? Why are we getting an error? Doesn't have the price, exactly. So it took this lookup value, which is vanilla latte. It went to our beverage list and it said not that one, not that one, not that one. No match found, right? It doesn't have it. This is a really great use of VLOOKUP. You can frequently use VLOOKUP to look at something that might be missing values, or if you're not sure if two lists match each other, that kind of thing. This is actually really helpful to say, oh, my menu is missing this beverage. So to fix an error, you have two options. One option is to use another formula, and I'll open up my little formula browser here to show you this. I'm going to go insert function, and that's going to open up my little formula builder over here. And there's a great function that I love called if error. All right, if error is a pretty simple little formula. You can see down in our syntax here, it's got two values. First value is some value that it takes in. And if that value is an error, your second argument is what you want it to say instead of this weird n/a # thing. So what I might use this formula for would be to come in here. Oh, it's typing over here. Let me delete this. Okay. I could come in here and say, this is an error. I'm going to say =, if error. I'm going to do my little arrow keys over to this guy. And then I'm going to say, put some text, something more helpful. So I might say like not found in menu, close my parentheses or close my quotes, close my parentheses. And now this nice little formula says this. I can spread this down, spread this up. Cool. So now what this column is doing is exactly the same thing that this column is doing. It's just grabbing this value if it's there. And if there's an error, instead of the weird error thing, it's putting like some nice explanatory text. This is a great feature because also now you could imagine, let's say your order list was a lot longer. Now you can easily filter this column by just to see the things not found in menu. And then you could easily update your menu, right? That would be an easy thing to filter by. So that's another reason that you might want to put in some error text. Okay. This is where it gets really fun. I hope you're excited. Okay. So VLOOKUP is going to return the first match that it finds when it goes to that list. So in this case, we went to our beverage menu. Let me hop back over here. If it was looking for matcha latte, it gets to, the second cell it's looked in, finds matcha latte, $6. Great. Now, if I add something to my menu, and let's say I add matcha latte again, and this matcha latte is like extra delicious or something, so it's $7. My VLOOKUP is still going to return my $6 over here because it's always going to grab the first instance that it finds. So if your data source is one where you might have multiple instances over here, you got to sort this if you want a specific one to show up first. So we could sort this by beverage name and then price high to low, for example. And then our VLOOKUP would change to sort our $7 matcha latte first. So what I could do, for example, is come over to my sort. I would use this custom sort thing because we're going to do a 2-layer sort. And I would say, all right, first I want to sort by the beverage. So just like, alphabetically by beverage. But since I know I have some duplicates, I'm going to add a second layer. So I also want to sort by price. I want to be able to say if there's 2 values for matcha latte, how do you decide which of those values goes first? So I'm going to say by price. And I'm going to say largest to smallest. I'm going to know the most expensive matcha latte price. Do that sort. I'm going to hit OK. Now you'll notice in our VLOOKUP, right, we got our $6, our $6. I'm going to hit OK on this sort. And you see, as soon as I sorted, my little formula just automatically updated over here to our $7 because it's grabbing that first one that it sees. So anytime you have duplicates in your data over here, you want to make sure that you're sorting it in a way that makes sense for your use case. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so sort, so do a sort. You want to select your data. If you have full columns in data, I would recommend selecting your full columns. In this case, I'm just doing a little test data, so I'm just going to do the rectangle. You're going to do the sort and filter in your top ribbon. For me, it's all the way on the right. If you have Excel or Windows, the ribbon might look slightly different, but it should be somewhere up here. Come down and do custom sort. And this is where you can add your levels. So it'll, when you don't have it sorted already, it'll just pop up with the one level like this. So in this case, I want to sort by beverage first, and then I'm just going to hit my little plus sign to add a sort logic. So first it's going to go by beverage. And then if there are multiples of the beverage, it'll go by price. Maybe this time I want smallest to largest. So right now I've got my matcha latte $7 first. Do this. Hit okay. Now it's moved my $6 matcha latte up to be before my $7 one, and my formulas over here got the update, and they've got my $6 one. All right. So this has been a lot of me talking, and I'm going to give you a chance all to practice this. So I've got a data set for you at this link. So you want to type that into your browser, and you can download, it's an Excel file. Everything we're talking about today, all these formulas also work in Google Sheets. So if you're a more avid Google Sheets user, you can also copy it into a Google Sheet and use it there. The formulas are almost identical. There's a few cases where they're slightly different, but they're mostly the same. So use whatever you prefer. So I'll give everybody a second to go to that link, download that data set. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a column to that data set using our VLOOKUP. Okay, so using all the stuff we just talked about. All right. So once you go to that link, you're going to get a data set that looks like this. It's going to have some tabs on the bottom, which are some different sheets within your workbook. That's like Excelese for that. And you're going to add this first column, or the first sheet is your shows. So your task is to add a column here called upload date, and then use VLOOKUP to go into your episodes tab and grab the earliest upload date for that show. Okay. You're going to do a formula like we just did, VLOOKUP to look up your show in your episodes tab, and you're going to grab the earliest date. So hint for that is to use the sort that we just talked about to make sure that your data is in the right order. Yeah, great. So first thing you should do is grab your upload date for each of these is a podcast, and you want to get the date of their last or of the date an episode was uploaded into this column. Yeah, so maybe worry about that first, and then once you've got that working, you can go back and do the sort. If you're feeling a little bit stuck on VLOOKUP, I recommend doing the insert option up here and then function and pulling up the little VLOOKUP help window on the side. And that'll help remind you what your argument should be for this column. The earliest date should go on top. Yeah. So for each show, so if you look at your episode data, you've got your episode ID, you've got your show ID, and some of your shows are going to have multiple uploads. right? So like our matcha lattes, right? We had 2 matcha lattes and 2 different prices. So here we might have the same show doing multiple uploads, but we want to get the first one, the earliest date. So you'd want to do that. Yeah. So the show table is where we're adding our VLOOKUP column. And the data that we're looking up to is our episode. So that's the one we want to sort. Like in our previous example, we sorted the price table, even though we were adding the column to our orders table. Does that make sense? Yeah, sure. So you just copy paste that column. Okay, so let's talk about why that might not work. So if you look at our episode, our things here, right? So ID here on our episode tab, and then we've got show ID. This first one is that the episode ID is 1, the show ID is 143. So that one, so this file is uploaded on 210 would need to go to show 143. So just pasting. Does that make sense? But we paste that this is show number 3. So the shows right here, right now the shows are in order with show ID number 1 first, but on this tab, show ID 153 is first. So that this upload date doesn't go with the show. This is an episode ID and this is a show ID. This is a pretty common data setup that you'll get. So ID on this tab is a show ID, and then on this tab, that ID here, show ID is a separate column. So this that means that this is. Yep. So on this, so you want to add a column here and call it something like upload date. And then an upload date is where you want to write your VLOOKUP formula. So this is where you want to think about your arguments for this function. So what's the first argument for the Got it. Okay. So what this function is going to do is this is going to say, okay, for show ID number 1, when was our upload date? So we can delete our formula and let's go to some place. Okay, so we go to our episodes. So we want to find show ID number. So let's scroll down and see if we can find it. So let's show ID. Okay, so that was ID 25. So we found our upload date. So on your episodes tab, 25. Okay, that one was 2/8/24. That's our upload date. So if we go back to shows, for show 25, and we type in for that row 2. So if you went and did that for every single row in our show table, that's what this formula is doing. Saving you time to do that manual process for each other. So that helps. Yeah, and I would recommend if you do open the little formula browser on the side so you can see the 4 parts that you need. Oh yeah, you get the top here. Yeah. Okay, so give that a try. Yeah. Okay, so this is your episodes tab. We want to add our upload date to our shows. Oh. Yeah, okay, so you got your header here. So this is, so our show ID is 1. And if you go to our episodes, so the show IDs are not important. So if you have to scroll down to see show ID number 1. So that's what our formula is. That's going to be your second argument, which is the range to look up in. So if you start your formula here. Our like references are ID. That's how we're going to be able to find correct statements. That's going to be our first argument. And then you want to go grab your all the data that you want to go looking at. So that's where we put the village tab. And we're first going to grab our ID and grab our column. This was maybe we just episodes. And this is actually show all the other time. That's grab. That's okay. And then you do your comment and you do your last two lines. I got something. Got something. Okay. So this is from something we talked about last week, formatting. You're getting a weird looking number and you wanted a date, right? So if you remember how to get from a weird looking number to a date. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and then you want to make sure that formatting goes all the way down. Great. What's up?
I got but then it's not available.
Okay. Okay, so you got the lookup in there, but it's not grabbing the thing you want.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, that's a good starting place. All right, so let's click on your first one there, your first error, and let's see what it's showing. So, okay, it's going over to shows. Okay, so yep, it's in shows. It's looking at our cell C1. So what's in cell C1? The last name of the podcaster.
Should be episode C1.
So what in this table are we using to find our show in the other table? ID. Which column is that?
A1.
A1. Okay, and is it, so it's definitely A. What's A1 though? What's the value in the cell A1?
It's ID.
ID, and we want the actual ID number. So we would want A2, since we're in row 2. Yeah. Great. Cool. Let's do one more look at this. Let's go to our first error. So which row are we in? Which row is this in right now?
H.
Column H, row.
Row 2.
Row 2. Okay, and this is still, looks like this is still looking at A1 for some reason. So let's put that as A2. I think we have to fix our third row. So that's A2. Hit enter, and then drag that all the way down. Copy that or two. Well, so copy the one we just fixed, right? This. Yeah, that all the way down. And then let's just check our second row here. So this is going for A5. Yep, that's the correct thing. Okay, great. Now, you'll notice you want this to be a date and it's instead like a weird looking number thing. Yes. This is something we covered last week. You can change the format in this little drop down right here. It says general. It's, yep, and you can change that to a date. Yeah. And then you can drag that formatting all the way down. It's that formatting all the way down as well.
Thank you.
Hey, let's take a look. Then yeah, so that's the value we want for it. Yeah. So. Okay. Here's so it looks like you missed this line this way, and that is yeah. Now. Great, so you got it. Yeah, so you want to grab that whole little rectangle. Yep. Oh, okay, yeah, right when you finish typing, you want to hit enter so you don't like. Cool. Okay, so we've got to be looked up as returning an error. So this is good. We can troubleshoot here. So let's go check our arguments. So this one is going to cell C2. C2 is right. Ah, okay. We'll put it here. So this is the value that we want to go look up in the other two. So which value in this table links us to the other two? ID. That first argument should be our ID. That first formula should be our same. Grabs it. We'll check. Okay, that looks good. Now let's go to our second argument, which is the array. All right, so that says episodes A1. It looks like that's only looking in that one cell. So this is going to expand. All right. This is going all the way over to our column P, right? So let's do about columns right here. A, get rid of the one, and just do a colon. That's going to look at all those columns. It's just full columns A through B. Let's try that. Let's enter. Yeah. Okay, we got a value. This is very exciting. There's one last trick from here. This is something from last week. Number formatting can be weird. So if it doesn't know it's a date, and super easy here. So it's a general, and then date. Great. And then you can copy paste that all. And then I would suggest that you pick one and go check it in your sheet. Yeah, no problem. How you doing over here? Ah, okay. All right. Good. Okay. So let's troubleshoot ourselves. So our first thing that we should be grabbing is the value we're going to go look up in the other table. So the value that we're going to go look up in the other table. Ah, okay. So you've got the whole column of these. You've got A2 all the way down to A501 here. But in this row, it's just going to go look up ID1. So all you need to tell it here is cell A2. Because right now it's what it's trying to do. So it's just for this row. Yeah, exactly. And this is actually a case where you don't want your dollar sign, because if you have your dollar sign, then your next row is also going to look for ID number 1. Go back up to row A2. Yeah. Right. A3. Perfect. And then our column index number. Okay, so you selected column D, right? Yeah. Okay, so column index number, let's pull up your function first. Let's do insert function. Okay, so we're gonna column number where the matching value should be original. So that one should be a number and not a bunch of cells. So which column has the date of one? Yep, I'll see which is our which number column. How many columns over is that tomorrow? Oh, it's 3. Yep. So all we need in the number 3. Oh no. That's okay. Looking. Okay. Oh, it looks like we lost it. Which was a 3 in there. 3. Okay, now we're in business. So that's not a date. So the last little formatting trick for this, if it doesn't know it's a date, it's going to give you a weird number. So go to general up here. And then you can choose date. List. Just you. And hang on a second, turn it into a date. You can paste that all the way down. Yeah. So much. And states is. Okay, great. So we've had a little issue. So let's go look at our formula. Yep. Okay, good. So, great. So, okay, cool. So we've got A2, that looks like our right ID, right? So our second argument, A through E. So yeah, very good. Okay, but now our numbers, because now the third column is different. It's one fewer column. Okay, I want you to place that all the way down. All right, that looks great. Okay, cool. All right, let's do a quick. Okay. Let's do a quick walkthrough of this one. So I've done a few individual looks at this one. So I want to know my upload date for my shows. So I'm going to add my column here. You follow, everybody follow along and raise your hand if you did something different as you go. Okay. So I'm going to do my upload date. So I'm going to do my VLOOKUP, spell. I'm going to go over here and grab my ID, which is my show ID right here. That's the thing I'm going to go look up in my episodes table. All right, next thing I'm going to do is go find my little table that I want to look things up in. Now, this is the trick that we just learned back here with our where we're looking up our table. The thing that we're looking up should be in our leftmost column. So remember I said we come back to leftmost column. So that's here. So we've got our whole table of data here. All this information is relevant to our episodes. But in this case, because we're looking up show ID, we want to make sure that we're starting with show ID here. So if you write your formula with columns A through E here, it will work, but it's not conceptually doing the right thing. Okay. So what you want to do here is grab from column B, which is where we want to look up our show ID. Over, since we're only grabbing upload date, you could do these two columns. You could do all the columns, doesn't matter, as long as you include the column that you want. In our case, that's going to be column 2, because I'm just going from my show ID over to my upload date. That's 2 columns. And then my last argument, like I said, I would always recommend putting this as false. I'm going to hit enter, even though I'm still like over on my episodes tab and I'm writing this formula over here. As long as you hit enter, it'll kind of lock in what you write. And now we've got the date 45328, which is not a date. So if you're here last week, or if I just told you this one-on-one, you can come over here to your number format menu, which will be right here. It'll probably say general. That's our default. And you can pick any of the date options here, and it'll change it to a proper date format. It's just one of those little weird things about Excel. If it doesn't know something as a date, it'll just give you a nonsensical number. And then you can just double click this little corner and it'll fill all the way down. You can also drag with your mouse. And then the next most important thing to do is go check that your data is correct. So I saw someone already did this back here, which is great. So in this case, I'm going to say, all right, what's one of these numbers that I could go check? Maybe I'll go look at my episodes. Okay, let's go look at number 25 here. That should be 28, right? If I were going to do it manually. So now I'm just going to go check my sheet. Go look for show 25. Okay, I'm going to go look over my VLOOKUP. It got 28. That's a good gut check that it's working. Okay, now I think a couple of you on your formula, just to like you initially got it working, looking at episodes with your columns A through E, all the columns. Like I said, that'll work. That'll like give you an answer, but that is going to match your show ID to your episode ID. That's actually not what we want to do. We want to match our show ID to show ID over here. So if your second argument starts with A here, if it's episodes, and then A through E or A through anything, you want to change it to start with B instead, so that we're starting with our show ID column. And then you want to change your number to be 2. Since we're starting one column over, it's our second column instead of our third. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, great question. So in that case, you would want to use those dollar signs, our absolute cell references. So if it was like our matcha latte example, let's just show that one for a second. So in this case, our second argument here has the dollar signs in front of each letter and number of our cell reference. That's the thing that's going to lock them in place. So for example, if we don't necessarily want to do that in this case, but if we did, all we would do is come in here and we'd add our dollar signs. You can actually also do dollar signs to just lock the columns. That's if your like formula is going to go over rows or over in columns, and otherwise it would go over. But for this case, I could do $B, $2, and then $C. Maybe let's say this data set was 50 rows and I only wanted it to look in those 50. And then I would do another $50 right there. Yeah, good question. Yeah, anytime you see something like this, where it's just a letter colon another letter, that's going to be grabbing the whole column. That's very useful, especially for large data sets. That way you don't have to worry about like selecting all the rows, because maybe if you add a row later, it won't be captured in your formula, that kind of thing. So if you just select your whole column, you don't have to worry about getting the row number exactly right. That make sense? Okay. How'd this side do over here? You guys doing okay with the lookup? Similar to what you got for a formula? Looking good? Okay. Awesome. So then the second little piece of this is to make sure we're getting the right date. So it's possible, we don't know at our podcast network, if some of our shows might have uploaded multiple audio files, or maybe it's one of those podcasts that does an episode every day, so we've got a bunch uploaded in there. I want to get the earliest date. Maybe I'm like making a release schedule for all these shows that I'm going to post on our social media accounts. I want to get the earliest release date of all of our shows for this week. So what I'm going to do for that is leave my formula. So I've already written my formula. It's all good. I don't need to do anything else with my formula. I'm going to go over to my episodes table and I'm going to do a sort to make sure that in case any of my shows uploaded a duplicate or uploaded multiple files, that I'm going to get the earliest one that they uploaded. So to do that, I'm going to select a good little trick for this. You can either just click on your column header and drag over just to get your full columns of data, or you can just click into anywhere in your sort of like in the columns that are populated, hit Command A or Control A on a Windows, and that'll just automatically grab everything that's filled in. Okay. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do my 2-layer sort. So I'm going to come over to my sort and filter in my home ribbon, go custom sort, and then who wants to tell me how I should sort? Which should be my first sort by? Great. So I could sort by upload date, but I first want to know if any show has, like, I want to look with an upload date for each show. So upload date's going to be my second level of filter. What's going to be my first level of filter or first level of sort? ID, perfect. And then my second level will be just what you said, upload date. Perfect. And this is going to go oldest to newest. That makes sense. I want the like oldest, earliest date. I'm going to go okay. And then I see, okay, right off the bat, show number 1, for example, uploaded 2 files, one on February 6th, one on February 10th. So now I know that my VLOOKUP for show 1 should be getting 2.6. Let's go check. Show number 1, 2.6. So I've like gut check that it works. Always a great idea when you're doing a formula to go like do 1 or 2 manually in your head and like go check that it's the right answer. You'll catch a surprising number. Most mistakes, I would say, you can catch by just doing a few kind of spot checks. That's correct. Okay. How are we feeling so far? Is this feeling too easy, too difficult? Where are we at? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle. Okay. Okay. Middle to diagonal up. Okay, I'll take that. All right. So let's talk about a couple other things. All right, so we talked about errors. right? So this is where we're going to use a concept called nesting formulas. For VLOOKUP, you're commonly going to get errors. You're frequently going to have situations where the thing, your second list has things that aren't in your first list or vice versa. So this is where we use one of my all-time favorite Excel formulas, if error, and then you can tell it whatever else it should say in case there's an error. So in this case, I could do my if error column. So we'll check for this. Okay, go over here, and I could add a column, and I could just do equal sign if error. Grab my date, do a comma, and then put some nicer message that I would want it to say. No upload found, close my parentheses, close my quotes. This is another great example. I want this to be date. And if we go down to one where there actually is an error, now it's got this nice message, no upload found. It's a little bit nicer for, my boss who I'm emailing the spreadsheet to. Okay. So now, if you were here last week, or if you looked at the recording from last week, the concept of nesting formulas is that this is our formula, right? This is our first argument. This is our second argument. You can replace any argument in a formula with another formula. Okay. So in this case, what I just did with my two columns. Okay. What I just did with my two columns is I just said, okay, cell H2, right? So it looks very similar to the one I have in the PowerPoint, right? H2 and then my thing in quotes. But what you can do is replace this with your whole VLOOKUP formula. If you typed your whole VLOOKUP formula here, you could accomplish this sort of result in one column instead of two. Does that make sense? So that's what we're going to practice next. So here's another visual of how that works. So these are two simple text formulas. We talked about len earlier. Don't worry about substitute. It's just a formula where you're substituting spaces for no space. So it's taking 3 arguments, a text string, the thing we want to get rid of, and the thing we want to go there instead. 2 formulas. This one has 3 arguments, 1 argument. Pretty simple. Now you can take, instead of typing my full name into substitute here, you can just take this whole substitute and all its arguments and place it in place of our argument in our len. And we can accomplish what's done in these 2 formulas in just 1 line or in just 1 column in our spreadsheet. Okay, does that general idea make sense? We're replacing an argument in our function with another function. Okay, you can do this with any of your Excel formulas. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our, we're going to try out a nested formula. So you're going to go back to your same sheet that you have, go to your VLOOKUP column, and I want you to try adding that if error formula that's going to take your VLOOKUP answer and replace it with not uploaded yet. Okay. Yeah. That's a great question. Usually when you're figuring out nested formulas, it can be helpful to do it in a separate column. Just so you can look at your old column and your new column and make sure it makes sense. So yeah, I would recommend trying that first, just so you can see how it looks. Yeah.
So I tried to do the error, but still the name shows.
Okay, good, because our text here isn't in quotes, and it's only going to understand text if it's in quotes. So let's try that. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, so anytime you're doing text in as an argument in the formula, it should be in your double quotes. Otherwise, it's not going to understand what to do there. All right, so if you're working on your nested formula, something that's really helpful for nested formulas is to just do your second formula in a totally different column first so you can see it, right? So in my sheet here, I have upload date. This is my whole VLOOKUP thing we wrote before. Then I added another column. I just called it upload date V2. And it's just it's only doing my if error. So it's just saying, go look at column H And if there's an error, replace it with upload found. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking at this. It's got the same date. It's got the same date. It's got the same date. It found an error and it gave the message I want, right? So now I can visually see it's working. Both of the layers are working. So now to combine it, for the purposes of visualizing, I'm going to do this in a third column. You can do it this way also if you like. I'm going to call it upload date final version, if you will. And what I'm going to do here is combine my formulas. Now, what's nice is I already wrote them. So in this case, I might just copy paste them. Okay. So I'm going to go grab my VLOOKUP thing. I'll copy this. I'm going to do Command C. And then if you're ever editing a formula, you can hit escape to get out of it so you don't accidentally type more. And then in my upload date, I'm just going to do my if error. Instead of just going to cell H2 again, I'm just going to hit Command V, Command paste on my keyboard. It's pasting in my whole VLOOKUP thing from before. Do my comma, do my not uploaded yet in my double quotes, because otherwise it's going to give me an error. Close my parentheses, hit enter. Pesky number again. So I'm going to reformat to my short date. And then I'm going to drag this down and compare my results. Okay, so in my original column H, I was getting my dates and my errors. In my second version, I was getting my date, but I got my nice little message instead. And then now in column J, I'm doing both of those things in a single formula where I've got my whole formula nested together. I've got if error, then instead of just a single cell, I've got my whole VLOOKUP expression right here before my comma. Make sure you close your parentheses. That's where the parentheses can get tricky. Close your parentheses, then your comma. And then I've got my missing message, my double quotes. Give me a little wave if you think you've got it working and I can come check it out. Good. All right. Excellent. Oh, good. All right. Take a look. Okay, very close. You got your equal sign included in there, and we only need the equal sign at the beginning. Like this. Very good. Oh, you deleted your parentheses. Let's do it. Yeah, equal sign. Leave your parentheses. Yep, there you go. Very good. Okay, good catch. So you only, in your formula, you only need your equal sign at the beginning. If you paste your equal sign again in the middle, it's gonna get angry at you. Or do with an error message. How are we doing over here? Is the error working okay? Yeah. Ooh, looking good. Okay. Okay, maybe that copy paste. Cool. It looks like it's working. Okay, so remember to change this to like home theme when we're starting our episode or our show ID. Yeah, so you want to change that to start with B and then your number would be 2. Yeah, yeah, for sure. So this is our ID number for our show, right? It's right here, and then we go look at our episodes. In order to look up our show ID, which column is our show ID? Yeah, so you always want to start with the column. Yes, exactly. So you want to keep in your head which value is the same between the two tables, and that's the one you want. Yeah. 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 Very good. Make sure you paste that all the way down. Yeah. Cool. All right. Feeling good about if error? Okay. Great. All right, and I didn't paste these all the way down, but I could do that by just going to my little corner right here and just double clicking. Same here, double clicking, it's pasting all the way down. Super cool. Okay. All right, let's do a couple more VLOOKUPs because these are important and you'll use this a lot if you're doing Excel. So we're gonna do two more. We're gonna do show title from the show sheet onto our episode sheet. Okay, so if we go back to our data set right here, let's say I'm working with this sheet and I'm going to send this sheet to somebody and somebody might not know what the title of show number 3 is. The person I'm sending it to might not have that. So I want to add a column here called show title. And I'm going to use VLOOKUP in this column to get the title from my shows sheet. Okay, so it's sort of like a reverse from what we just did, or like a flip from what we just did. Okay, so I'm adding a column here. You're going to do your equals VLOOKUP. And then you're going to go look for your show ID in your other tab and get the title of the show. Okay. There we go. And go ahead and get your if error in there. You can start by just writing your VLOOKUP and make sure that's working. And once you have it working, go ahead and nest your if error in there in case you've got any errors. All right, when you think you get it working, let me know, or if you get stuck, let me know. Yeah, you're doing right. No, maybe try that a little bit. I don't know. Might just be a little glitchy or a little slow right now.
It's too much processing power.
Maybe it's yeah, I mean, you can always just drag it all the way down, just like scrolling if you have to, but yeah, I get that. I get that in Google Sheets from time to time, but I think it's just for like tap it slow or whatever. So yeah.
Is that working?
All right. You tell me, what's the title supposed to be for that first one? Show ID. Okay. So, yep. Title there. hobbies. All right, what do we get with our formula? Journal hobbies. Looks like it's working. All right, you want to walk me through what you did here, and I'll do it up on the screen.
So I put the VLOOKUP formula,
After our equals sign, put our VLOOKUP formula. Okay.
and then because I'm looking at the show ID, so I click the V column
Okay.
to indicate the whole column, and then I go to the and then I go to the show tab.
Okay.
From the column A to E because I want to include the podcast type.
Great, which is in column E. Perfect.
And then the next index number is 5 because the podcast number is the 5th column.
5 columns over. Okay.
And parenthesis and false.
Yep. Perfect. Put my false. Close my parentheses. Double check that I've got my 4 things. Hit enter. Okay, show number 1, it's giving me adrenaline hobbies. So I go back to my shows. First title, adrenaline hobbies. It's like we're rocking and rolling. And then I can go over here. Should be able to double click and have that go all the way down unless unless your computer's running a little slow, in which case the double click might not work, in which case you can just grab that handle and go all the way down, or you can copy paste with Command C, Command V on your keyboard if you're more of a keyboard person. Okay. Make sense? Feeling good? Kind of flip of what we did before, grabbing some other information. Okay. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to try this one more time with our campaigns. So there's a couple other tabs on here. So we're going to add a column on our campaign participation tab. Okay, so what this tab is going to tell us is our campaign ID, the name of our campaign, the show that's participating. So we've got a bunch of shows participating in each campaign. Okay. And then we've got our CPM, which if you were here in week 1, CPM is an advertising term. It's our cost per 1,000 impressions. So cost per 1,000 times of playing this ad. Since it's a cost, I'm going to take a second and format this column as a dollar sign or as a currency so that there's a dollar sign in front. So I'm just going to select my column, come to my little format options, and I'm going to change this to a currency. You don't have to do that, but it's always nice to format your data with a unit when you have it. Okay, so you're going to add a VLOOKUP column here. This is similar to what we just did, but just giving you some more reps. Okay, I'm going to add a column here that's going to be called personal endorsement. And you're going to do a VLOOKUP to get some information from our campaigns tab, which will tell you for each campaign whether personal endorsement is required or not. This is like in an ad, if you have to say like, I personally use a Quip toothbrush and I love it. In some ads, you can just say like, I've heard Quip toothbrushes are great. Advertising industry is weird. It's weird, but that's a thing that happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to look up this information and add our column in our participation tab. You're going to adding a VLOOKUP column, and you should be having your true or false result in here. So we're VLOOKing up to get that and have it appear in this column, true or false. Make sense? Okay, so do that first, and then I want to give you guys another nested formula to try, but don't do that yet. Just do your VLOOKUP first, and then we'll go to our nesting step. All right. When you got it, does somebody want to tell me what you got? You got it? Yeah? You want to tell me what you got? Look up. B2. key that we're referring to. Perfect. Perfect. All right. That's fine. The extra columns are no harm, no foul. You're good. 2, because it's my second column that I'm grabbing. Great. And then false, because we like to always put false. Closing bracket. Beautiful. Okay, great. And you picked B2 here because it's ad campaign. So this is just to show you it can be any text. It doesn't have to be an ID number, right? So in this case, we've got our ad campaign, and that's the text that we're looking up in our ad campaign thing. Now, something to be careful of with this is the lookup is case sensitive. So, and it's like spelling sensitive, right? It's an exact match. So if your like campaign here is spelled slightly differently than your campaign here, it's not going to match very well. So I would recommend if you're if you're sending data to someone who like you anticipate might be doing a task like this, I would encourage you to use an ID number or just something that is less likely to be misspelled, maybe something copy pasted. Things like an email address are better to match on than a name. Someone might have like James or Jim, but their email address would be consistent. So just think about anytime you're the one setting up the data, you want to try to think of something consistent. In this case, it worked fine because I made sure they were all spelled right for you. But you might run into that out in the real world. Okay, great. So I got my answer. This is false. My DoorDash campaign, I'll just go check really quick. DoorDash is false. Great. So I'm going to paste that all the way down. Before I do that, I'm going to nest another formula. So you can nest with any formula. So far, we've just done if error. I'm going to show you another just example of something you could nest. And in that case, I'm going to do that here. So I'm going to add a formula called if. Talked about this one a little bit last week, or you might have seen it. I'm just going to do my equal sign and do if, open parentheses, and then if is going to take 3 arguments. It's going to take a logical test. So that's something that evaluates to true or false. Value if true, value if false. So it essentially allows me to replace my values. So in this case, my logical test, since this column is already true, false, it's easy. I just say check that cell and see if it's true or false. Easy peasy. I could, if you want to see how it works, you could type like 1 = 4 or something like that and see how it works with like more of a test. You can do, greater than, equal than, all your normal logic functions. I'm just going to do that one as a quick example. If true, I want to say something that a podcaster will understand, right? They won't understand true, false. They might understand personal endorsement is required. So I'm going to type in my quote. Since my text, let's say personal endorsement is required. Close my quotes. I don't actually want to put a different value if it's false in this case. And you can tell if your arguments have the brackets around them, they're optional. So because I'm just going to leave it as false. If it's false, I don't want to like change the wording. I'm just going to only give it 2 arguments and it's still going to work. So that is great. Now I'm going to paste this all the way down and I'm going to go look for one that is true. All right, so my original formula said true. And now my if is adding my nice little sentence instead. Maybe I'm going to use this sheet as like a mail merge out to some podcasters or something like that. So I want my sentence. And then last thing I'm going to do is do my nest. So I'm going to go over here and do this all in one column. Plus PE for personal endorsement. And I'm going to do first I'm going to copy paste my VLOOKUPs. I have that. Command C. I'm just going to hit return so I don't accidentally type more in there. Then I'm going to do my if statement here. And now my logical test, I'm just going to paste my whole VLOOKUP because that column is going to return a true false. Do my comma, do my nice little sentence, personal endorsement is required. Close my quote. I'm going to skip my last argument since it's in the brackets. I know I can do that. Close my parentheses, get my answer. And now again, this column G here is doing what E and F are doing, but just in one formula instead. So we've used if error, we've used if, any other formula, you can nest together in that same way. How are we feeling about formula nesting? Make sense? All right. Moving on. Okay, so we just spent a whole bunch of time looking at VLOOKUP, which is a classic Excel function that's been around since, the prehistoric Excel times. Okay? There's a newer function called XLOOKUP, which after Excel 2019, I think what was Excel 2021 maybe is the next major version. That's where they added XLOOKUP, which is essentially the next generation of VLOOKUP. Now, I taught you VLOOKUP first because it's a little more limited, a little sort of like simpler in what it can do. But XLOOKUP can do everything that VLOOKUP can do and more. So if you are using Google Sheets, if you're using Excel Online, or if you're using desktop Excel that is a more recent version, you will have XLOOKUP, which can do some cool stuff. So first important thing it can do is instead of only being able to grab values over to the right of your lookup value, it can grab a value wherever, including over to the left. I know that doesn't sound like the biggest technological advancement of all time, but it's pretty handy in case your columns are just in an inconvenient order. All right, and it can bring over multiple columns at once. So if you want to bring over multiple columns from your other table, you can do that in one line with XLOOKUP, which is really cool. And the if error nesting that I just taught you, with XLOOKUP, you can do that as its own argument and you don't have to nest it with if error, which is pretty cool, but it's doing the same thing. So this is a side-by-side of what two formulas that do the exact same thing look like, but one is with our VLOOKUP and one is with our XLOOKUP. So first thing you notice is that this one is wrapped in our if error function. This one isn't, it just has an extra argument at the end that's filling in our value for if error. So this formula has added this nice advancement because they know that people type this all the time. So now they've added it so you can just do it in your formula, make it a little bit easier. They've also set the default to exact match. So when you're using XLOOKUP, you don't need to put false because that's just the default. And then the last thing they've done is they've allowed you to look up multiple values at the same time. So let me show you a more concrete example. Okay, so just to go through the syntax of XLOOKUP. So it's mainly going to give you 3 arguments that you want to look at. But this optional if not found, that's where you can put the message you otherwise would have put in your if error function. Okay, but lookup value, this is the same as VLOOKUP, so it's just going to be that value that you're going to go search for. Lookup array, that's where you're going to go look up your value. And then return array, that's the value that you're going to return. So instead of giving it column number 3 or 5 like we were just doing, you're just going to select the column or columns that you want it to spit back to you. Okay. Oh, no, I have this, and I learned today that I have an older version of Excel on this computer. So I have to do the XLOOKUP demo in Google Sheets, but it's the same thing and the formula works the same way. So here again is our beverage data, our beverage orders over here. So I'm going to do the same task I did before with VLOOKUP at the beginning of class. Should always add a header to my column. Let's say item price. Always, always, always add a header to your column. Okay, and then I'm going to do my XLOOKUP. So what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the thing I want to look up. So that step's the same as VLOOKUP, my E3. Then I'm going to go over to the range where I want to go look up cappuccino. So where's my column that would have that value? I'm going to select this. I did my dollar signs. I did my absolute reference here because it's short, but I could have done the whole column. It's probably better in general. And then I'm giving it the range that I want it to go look up. So instead of selecting this rectangle and telling it column 2, I'm just giving it this range. Now I could have had the prices over here and I could have just given it, you know, what would that be? Column Z, right? I could have given it that column and it would have still grabbed them even though they weren't to the right, right? That's that advancement, okay? So I'm giving it that as my third argument. Those are my B2 to B5. Again, I've just got it locked because it's my little rectangle here. And then I wanted to do the if error because I love if error, but I didn't have to wrap it. I just gave it that optional last argument for my text to say missing from the menu. And that's my formula. So when I go down, I see that my first one is changing from E3 to E4. That's because it's looking up my next thing in my order. But my locked references, my absolute references are staying the same. A2 to A5, A2 to A5, those are staying the same. Here's my missing one, my missing vanilla latte, coming right down. So this is the exact same thing we did with VLOOKUP, but a little snazzier, a little bit more like sort of visually cleaner to write, or once you know these formulas, looking at this one, it's a little easier to understand what it's doing versus looking at a nested one using VLOOKUP. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so next up, we are going to do, all right. So add another column to your show participation table. If hopefully everyone has newer than 2019 Excel. Go ahead and we're going to do this again, but try doing it with XLOOKUP instead of VLOOKUP. Okay. So we're going to go, oh, is it not called show participation? Did I get the name wrong? It is called campaign participation. Where are you? Yeah. Okay. So you're going to add a column here. Let's show title. We did something very similar to this on the other tab, but you're going to do this one with XLOOKUP instead of VLOOKUP. Okay. So on your campaign participation tab, you're going to go look up your show ID and you're going to get the title of the show and have it appear here, but you're going to use XLOOKUP instead of VLOOKUP. Make sense? Okay. I will put the XLOOKUP example back up. Which one's more helpful? This one? Maybe this one's more helpful. Okay. Ugh. Move this up there. Okay. You're going to do something that looks like this instead of your VLOOKUP for your show title. Is anyone worried that their Excel is too old for this? You guys don't have that problem. Okay, great. Just me. I think you get it working, or if you get stuck, let me know. Yeah, for sure. So first thing we want is the cell that you're going to go look up in your tables. Okay, that's two, right? Next thing we want is the way to look up into where so we only want to look in column A for our meeting. This one is this is the difference. Yeah, so you're going to tell it the range to look at the ID, and then separately you're going to tell it the range to go with the answer. So you can just do A to A. Okay, and then instead of our number here, instead of telling it column 5, we're just going to select whatever column. Beautiful. Okay, great. So instead of range, yeah, exactly. The reason that that's handy is, let's say your titles were really over here. To use VLOOKUP, you have to come here. Just so you can look it up. Well, that's about, you don't have to do that. It doesn't matter the order. You can just select your columns wherever they are. So Right, exactly. For V lookup, it's only look to the right. Yeah. Yeah. Which doesn't seem like a problem until it becomes a problem. Right. This is really like, yeah. Very good. How are we doing over here? Okay, cool. So we got H2. Okay, what's going on there? Oh, H2 is just our current cell that we're in. So where's the ID position? For C2. Okay, great. And then comma. And then where we will look in our position relations. For episode, but probably makes more sense to go shows. So where we sort of show IDs are on here. Here's in the select in this case. Great. And then where is the column with the ticks? Okay, great. So that that's where the next text that we have. Yeah. So yeah, in this case, it works to show like that because that's it. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is the thing where it's doing the cell references, so it's see, so if you click in the first, click in the cell above this, just for something. Yeah. So go click in this one. So okay, so looking at B2 in cells A2 to B7, column 2 false. So again, go down around. Yeah. So this one is in the B3, and then it's looking in A3 to B8. Before was looking at 2 to 7, right? So it's like shifting down where it's looking. So there's two ways to fix this. You could put dollar sign in the first row, you can put dollar sign for the A2 to B7, $4 and then we'll lock that in. And you got to do dollars for the number. Dollars and A, dollars and 2. Oh, sorry, not that 2, that's that sign. Dollars and A, dollars and 2. Dollars and A, and then right after A. Yeah. The other thing you can do there is just have it be A, colon B, and I'll just write the whole columns and say this part, but then also just have to set it down. Yeah, that's not going to be double click right there. I got it. You got it? All right. How you doing?
Yeah.
All right. Show title. Okay, looking pretty good.
Yeah. It's
oh, it's it looks like you got an @ sign at the beginning. Okay. You got a plus sign. Okay, so what are we doing? So we're grabbing F2. All right, so what's until F2? Okay, so what should our first argument be for XLOOKUP? Our first argument for XLOOKUP should be, where's my XLOOKUP thing? The value to search for. So what are we going to search? What's the thing that's tying our two tables together that exists in both tables?
Shall I do?
ID. Yep. But you want to, so the first thing that we're going to tell it is, okay, grab the ID from this row, right? So well, we want it to go look up, go find show ID 1. C2, yep. And then go look it up in which column in your episodes table. All right, so what you gave it is B through F, but for X lookup, we just give it 1. We're just giving it the place to search, not the place to return from, just the place to search. So we don't want to search it in all the columns. We just want to search it in which column? B. B. Yep. So we should just do B to B there. So B to F. Yeah. You got to do B colon B to cover B1 columns. Yep. Okay. And then you got your return thing is column F. That looks right. And then you got your messages missing. Okay, let's hit enter and see how that looks. Okay, what do we got here? B to B. Ah, okay. So I think because we did B to B here, we got to do F to F here so that it's the same number of rows. Yeah. Cool. Enter. Yes. Nice.
Got it.
All right. How you doing over here? Yeah. So, okay, so for this one, we got show ID, it's C2, that's right. Okay, then grab our column A from our shows table. Let's go look at it. A for show ID, great. Here, okay. And then okay, cool. Hit enter. Okay, so it looks like that one's working. Let's arrow down next to. So let's see for. Ah, okay. Good. Okay, so let me pull my example back up here. This guy, okay. Got my value I'm looking up. I got the place I'm going to go look it up in, which is my column A values in this case. I got my reference that I'm going to go look it up in here. And then we're missing a comma? Yeah, I can see here is a, okay, what I would do is I would save the sheet and reopen it. Okay, there might just be like, okay, I'll let you know. Okay, whew, I was losing my mind for a second. All right, let me know if that works, by the way. Okay. How are we feeling about X lookup? Good? Cool, making sense? All right, if you guys can like look at us, spreadsheet, figure out that you need to use VLOOKUP to do something and then actually use VLOOKUP for something, that puts you ahead of like, I don't know, at least half of casual users of Excel. Okay, so this is a really good skill. As you can tell, it's a little tricky to like get your brain around like, okay, this is the one that's over here and I got to match it with the right. It's a little bit of a brain exercise. The more you do it, it becomes a little bit more obvious, which is why I had you guys do this one a few times, because it's one where repetition really helps. Okay. We're going to cover one other topic that's not XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. Any questions about that before we, did that work by the way? Yeah, or maybe try doing it in another column. Yeah, because it clearly is working in the like preview window. It's just not, it's so bizarre. Oh, technology. Okay, cool. Moving on from XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. Okay, last concept we're going to talk about today is cumulative formulas. Okay, so this is a pretty common data thing that you want to be doing where you're showing a value that adds up all the rows ahead of it, right? So in this case, maybe this is all the orders that came into my coffee shop today. So after my first order, my cumulative revenue was $6.50. My second order was also $6.50. So after those two orders, my revenue is $13. When I added my third order, my revenue is $19, right? So that's what cumulative is doing. It's performing a function on that row and any rows preceding it. Okay, concept, if that makes sense. So this is a very important point with using your absolute cell references. So for example, if I were going to create a cumulative formula, let me do a quick demo. Here we go. Okay, delete. If I were going to do a cumulative formula, oh my gosh. Okay, what I might do is I might say, okay, for my first order, it's just my first order. I'll hit enter. For this one, I want to do this plus this guy up here. All right, now I got my 13, looking right so far. Now, if I pasted this all the way down, now my numbers are looking pretty good because you'll notice what it did for me. So Excel looked at what I was doing. And when it got down to here, let's see, am I doing this right? My 13. Yeah, so my dollar signs, go back to my dollar signs, sorry. This is what I want to show you. Okay, so this one plus this one. Okay, and now what I want to do, so now if I wanted all three of those, I would have to do this one plus this one plus this one plus this one over here. And I would have to keep doing that all the way down, right? I'd have to keep like adding my cells. So the way that you're going to do this is you're going to do your sum. This is when you might want to start in your second column. You're going to go sum of this cell here. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Where's my... Okay, but you want to be adding up each value above it. So for example, okay, that's my formula. Let's go back. Okay, here we go. Oh no. Okay, let's do this again. So let's say I'm here. I want to do my cumulative revenue. So I want to do my one from today plus my one from up here, which is just my first one from over here. Okay, so now I've got my 13. So if you're coming all the way down your row and you get to this row, let's say, it's going to do this for me again. Okay, so it's doing this for me. So I get to here, and this is essentially just going to add our value from directly above to our value over here. Okay, so this is where it's pulling down. So N15, which is the row that I'm in, right? It's grabbing from this row. And then we're using the cell reference to go to row 14. We're going one row up. Okay, so in most cases with formulas, you're going to want your row number to be the same because you're wanting to grab something else from the same row. So if you're like debugging a formula and you're like, okay, I'm in row 15, most of the cells you want to be referring to should also be in row 15 so that you can get the right value. This is a case where we're actually going to go up and get the one from the row before. So we're adding our 13 and our 6 together to get our 19. The other way that you can do this formula is you could do a sum like this. So I might go here and I'm say, all right, I want to do a sum. This is a formula we covered last week, similar to just using the plus sign, but you can do it for a range. So I'm going to do a sum here plus this one over to the left. Okay, that's going to give me the same, I'm sorry, my sum of my column n. Oh my gosh. Just one more time. Okay. Sum of my column n. Okay, yeah, there we go. So I'm adding my first two items, then I'm adding my third one on, right? I could hit enter here. The trick for this, if you're going to do it this way, this is where absolute cell references come in, is I want to lock myself to start at N13. So I would put in my dollar signs on my N13, $1 sign in front of N, $1 sign in front of 13. That'll keep that there. And then if I paste this one down, I still keep my 21. So I'm looking at my formula and I'll say, all right, I'm here. I got my N13, N14 plus my N15. Here, it's going to grab this whole range that came before me. So it's still starting at N13. It's automatically going down to 15 because it's doing the relative reference there. And then it's adding my 16 right here. Okay, does that make sense? So this is it. I wanted to show you an example of where you might want to lock one of your cells, like do your dollar signs, your absolute reference on one cell, but not the other. And cumulative is an example of that because you want to keep the top cell where it is, but keep adding any rows that come beneath it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So when you're doing something cumulative, what you're usually going to do is have your first two values are going to be a little different than your like, because you got to like get it started. So in this case, all I did, I could have just copy pasted, I guess, but I just had it be equals my first sale. So that's all this is. And I had this one as my second sale plus my first sale. And then once I got down here, once I had enough to kind of start my formula, that's where I added in my sum with my reference. Doesn't necessarily, yeah, there's a few different ways you can do this. Like many things in Excel, like some of the style stuff is kind of up to you. In this case, I might want to do it this way if I'm anticipating that my order list is going to be super long and I'm going to set it up in my first few rows. And by the time I get to this row, I know this formula will work all the way down in my very successful coffee shop with my thousands of orders. This will work all the rest of the way down. So that's just an example. But yeah, you're right. There's a few different ways you could do this one. Just wanted to show you an example with the references. All right. We've got a few minutes left. I think I want to, we did some VLOOKUP practice already. Okay, I think I maybe want to skip this and talk a little bit more about a couple of other formula things because like you guys all got the last VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP. So I feel like you're in there. You're ahead of the curve. Okay, let's talk about a couple more things related to lookup formulas. So just a couple notes on best practices for using these in the real world. This is what I mentioned before. If you're the thing that you're looking up, so that piece of information that's tying the two tables, whether it's your show ID or your campaign name or whatever, it should ideally be a unique identifier. And it should be something that would always be spelled the same way, in the same capitalization, all of that. Email address is a common one that people use just to avoid any incorrect matches or incorrect mismatches. If you're not sure if an ID is unique, like let's say someone sends you this data set that we've been using and it's got this column that says show ID, but you're not sure, you're like, you don't trust this data set, or you're like, is this a unique ID? I don't know. One quick trick you can use for that is to use your conditional formatting, which we talked about last week. You can have it highlight any duplicates that are in this column, and you could just scroll down and eyeball real quick if any get highlighted. Okay, so I'll do that here. I'll say highlight them in red if there's any duplicates. I can just do a quick visual scroll down. I don't see nothing highlighted in red, which means there's no duplicates. That's great. If I had a bigger data set than I could scroll through, I could just add my filter option to my column, and you can filter by color. Okay, so I could come in and if there were any red ones, it would show me an option here to filter by any that were colored in red. And that would be the way that I could check if there were any duplicates. Okay, or check what the duplicates are. Because that's not options not showing up after I put on the conditional formatting, that means there are no duplicates. So I'm like an extra attentive data analyst in this case. I've checked that my data is sound before I go and assume that that ID is unique. Make sense? So that's just a little trick you can use. I would recommend making sure that your If you're going to use an ID like that, make sure you know it's unique or that you check that it's unique before you do it in a lookup. And then especially if you're using VLOOKUP, and this applies for XLOOKUP as well, it's going to grab that first value where it finds a match. So in that case where I had my 2 different prices for my matcha latte, just make sure your data is sorted however makes sense for your use case. So maybe you want to sort by your, your beverage, and then within your beverage, the price, or your show, and within your show, the date that they uploaded. That's the part of like data analysis that often requires just a little bit of critical thinking to say, okay, is this a case where I want the most recent episode or the oldest episode, and just sort accordingly. So just make sure you're thinking about that use case. Most importantly, you just want to make sure you sort in some logical way, because if you don't sort, if you skip that step, then you're going to get kind of random dates, right? Like for one of your shows, you might get a recent date. For one of your shows, you might get an older date because no sorting was done. So just want to check on sorting. It's a good way to just like be extra diligent and make sure your final analysis or final result makes sense. Okay, some real world tips. Okay, and then last thing I want to show you is a more specialized formula example. So last week and this week, we talked about a bunch of different formulas that you can use. The main thing that you need to know with formulas is that they exist and that you can Google how to set them up, right? This is anybody who uses Excel, myself included. I'm like, how do I do the formula where like what you Google, and you're looking for that syntax, you're looking for that explanation. You can also use the insert formula pop-up in your window. You're looking for the syntax, which is going to tell you what goes between your parentheses, what pieces of information do you need. If you know to go look for that and you know how to read that documentation, you can use any formula in Excel. So with that, like if you understand the formulas we covered last week were a lot of like math, like text-based formulas, etc. The formulas we talked about today, if you understand those formulas, you can use any formula in Excel. So I want to show you an example of a more complicated formula that any of you would be totally capable of using if you want. This is one that I use to figure out some of my student loan payments. Yay, student loan payments. Okay, so this sheet that I'm about to show you uses a few of the concepts that we covered today. It uses a more complex formula, but we'll set it up using just the same concepts that we just talked about. It uses some absolute cell references, so our $ friends when we need to lock in our reference. And then it's also using some cumulative formulas that I'll show you. Okay. So, all right. Here is this sheet that I've set up. So what I was trying to do with this sheet is put in a couple of pieces of information and figure out what my different monthly payments were, depending on how long I was going to be paying off these loans. Okay, if I was going to pay them off over, say, 60 months, my payment goes way down because I'm paying it over a longer time. If I'm going to try to pay them in a year, my payment goes super high because I'm trying to pay them fast. Okay, so, but this is the concept of this sheet. So the handy dandy formula that I use for this is called PMT, which stands for payment. So I've got my little help function over here to explain what this is. This calculates a payment for a loan based on the on constant payments. So assuming I make the same payment every period with a constant interest rate. So the interest rate's not changing over time. In this case, I had a fixed rate loan, so that this formula totally works for me. Okay, so none of you have seen this formula before, presumably. So all you need to do when you have a formula you don't know is just look at your syntax and figure out what you need. So in this case, I need a few different arguments. Looks like I need a total of 5. Okay, so I need my interest rate. I need the total number of payments I'm planning to make. I need the present value. Okay, so the total amount of my loan. And I need the future value that I want to attain after the last payment is made. In this case, I want my student loan balance to be 0, obviously, don't we all? So that I'm going to leave that argument out because I'm okay with it being 0 because it's omitted, okay? All right, and then this last one is another optional argument, which just has to do with whether you're making your payment at the beginning or end of the date period. Again, it's optional. I was okay with the default, so I omitted it from my argument. Okay. Then if you look at my formula that I put in here, so my loan amount, I just typed in my number. My interest rate, I just typed in my number, got those from my documentation. My months, I was like, let's see if I could pay these off in 12 months. What would that look like? And then I use that information to put in my formula, okay? So this is where I use my PMT formula and I put in these arguments that I've got right here. So I'm going to do my B2. So this is my interest rate divided by 12. So I had to do a little Googling to figure this out, right? So it's going to say the total number of payments you want to make on your loan. So I'm fixing that to my interest rate and I'm doing my divide by 12. I'm on my cell B3. This is telling me the number of payments I intend to make. Am I getting these in the right order? Yes. Okay. And then I'm going my loan amount. I figured this out because you have to make the loan amount negative to make this one work. And then I left off my other arguments. And then I've nested it in a rounding function. So the function round just takes your first argument and rounds it to 2 decimal places. Just because this is a dollar amount, I wasn't concerned about anything less than cents. Okay, so there's a case of it where I've used a nested formula. So this is one where I was like, how do I figure this out? And I Googled loan payment Excel formula. And I squinted at that and I squinted at my numbers and I like did some trial and error and figured this out. That's the kind of thing that I hope you all are going to be able to start doing now that you've got a few formulas under your belt, okay? So then coming down here, I can start to use some of my cumulative concepts. Okay, so what I'm doing here is figuring out what my monthly payment would be. And then in this lower part of the sheet, I'm figuring out in mortgages, this is like an amortization schedule. This is figuring out how long it'll take me to pay it off, like by what date, what'll my balance be each month, that kind of thing. So I'm coming over here. This one, I've done a absolute reference. So I'm gonna make the same payment every month. So I've got each of my upcoming months. I've got my payment is gonna be fixed. So I've set it as my dollar sign. So as it's copied all the way down, continues to be B4. Great. All right, then I'm going to do the principal amount. So I'm going to do my column C minus column E, which is my interest. Okay, so I've got my principal amount. I've got my interest, which is calculating from my interest rate up here. So you'll see it's got a locked reference, an absolute reference to B2. It's going up to my interest rate and grabbing my interest payment related to this. And then it's going to grab my ending balance. So where did I end up after I paid toward my principal? Okay, so my payment is my principal plus my interest. Okay. So now I'm coming down here and I'm grabbing, all right, so here's my interest up until this point. Here's what I paid toward the principal up until this point. Okay, so this is an example of using these cumulative formulas. So you'll see I'm in row 18. I've got row 18, but I'm also adding the cell above. So I'm adding E to the in G17, I'm adding to the row above. So it's that like cumulative concept where you're going to have one locked and one not. And then what's great about this sheet, I also put in some conditional formatting. So I said, as soon as my ending balance is less than 0, I'm going to have it turn green. So that's when I'm going to not have to make my student loan payments anymore. Okay. And what's great about this is because this is all based on formulas, if I said, oh, shoot, that's a really high monthly payment, I don't think I'm going to be able to make that payment. Let's see, what would my payment look like if I spread it out over 3 years? 3 years is 36 months. I can change this to 36. And my whole sheet changes because I based it on all these formulas, right? So now my monthly payment goes down. Now I can see my whole schedule. And it's, you know, I'd have to add more rows of the dates to see it go all the way down, which I could do. I could just copy paste this all the way down. Let me try that real quick. Should be able to just drag this on down and we'll see my balance keep going down. Let's see, in that case, I'd have it paid off. Well, much longer time, many more months than before. Okay, but I show you this as an example to say, one, if you have student loans, you can make yourself a sheet like this and see what it's going to look like. And also, this is the power of formulas, is because if any scenario I want to run, I'm changing one cell, my entire sheet changes. I've got colors. I've got, you know, if my interest rate changes, let's say I refinance, I just change my interest rate here. Let's say I go down to a 4% interest rate. Boom, all my interest payments change. My overall interest paid changes. And in that case, actually, if I negotiated a lower interest rate, I'd have it paid off by this point. So this is just an example to show you like what formulas can do. Another example of how you might be able to use them, which takes us right to time. So that's all we got for today. For next week, if you'd like to come back, next week we're going to cover charts and tables. So we'll talk pivot tables, especially, is one of the main concepts we'll be covering next week. So if you've heard of pivot tables or you've tried them or used them a little bit before, you can come on back next week and we'll talk about how to use pivot tables, what they're for, how to set them up. That's another great one for your resume. And then in week 5 of the series, the last week, we are going to take everything that we learned all together and put it together into creating a dashboard in Excel, so sort of like a final project, pulling together all the concepts that we've covered throughout this series. Week 5 will cover a quick refresher of all these concepts, so don't worry if you missed a week or whatever. You're welcome to come to week 5, and we'll put it all together at that point. And these are just, again, some of my favorite tools I'd recommend for learning Excel if you want some other sources. All right, that's all we got for today. Thanks for coming. I'll hang out for a few minutes if anybody has questions or any of that. Yeah, thank you guys for coming.